Good day, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Sophia Elizabeth Lambert, and I have my guest with me again today, Shawn Bonneteau, and we are going to continue our conversation on pornography, the trap of boys and men. So, Shawn, to continue, the last time you spoke about the story, the theme that pornography creates and the pull that it uses, that kind of story, the let's call them content creator or the directors or writers of those movies, films, whatever they
Sure.
are.
Yeah.
How how can how can we help young men to realize that it's not what it seems, but the trap is deeper, or the pit is very deep to pull oneself out of it once they have fallen? How can
Mm.
freedom come?
hmm Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's important for us to realize that it doesn't happen alone. We don't get hurt alone, and we don't heal alone. That's the challenge. Is we all get affected in community, but we also heal in community. So that's the one challenge with something like pornography. I would say sexual addiction in general is it's very isolating because our culture, especially the Christian culture, has created a lot of shame around the body, the penis and the vagina, or for reproductive reasons. We don't talk about sex in church. Pornography, oh, there's nothing here for that. So just go home and pray more. So the reality is one of the best things we can do to help people even just start with a mindset of freedom is to create space to talk about this stuff. Vulnerability opens the door. It actually comes from the root word vulna, which I think is to like open up a wound, and we need more of that happening. That's what Jesus did with people. He allowed them to open up a wound to him and he healed it. So that would be one of the starters. So usually there's like three things that I tell people that you need for a successful recovery from pornography. One of them is expert guidance. Second one is a proven roadmap, and the third one is like-minded community. And those three things go together perfectly because an expert guide is so key because you need to find somebody who understands the problem of pornography, because counselors are very rarely educated from their own story, let alone in general. A lot of I think it's the DSM, it's the book that counselors and psychologists study. They don't actually believe that sexual addiction is an addiction. So you need to understand that a lot of the experts in the field of counseling and therapy are being taught that this isn't actually a huge problem. And if somebody has the morality or the faith of a Christian, they'll have the understanding that it's a problem, but they're still learning from the same textbook. So we need to understand that finding an expert who understands the journey of healing pornography is going to be so important. And that's why I've dedicated my life to doing this work and teaching people from my own story. Because if you work with me, you can guarantee everything I'm teaching you is something that I have done and probably continue to do. And that's what an expert in a specific field does. And that to me is the first and greatest thing. I hire coaches. I have a coach right now helping me through grief and loss, which is an area that I want to learn more about in my own life and to help my clients with. So hiring a coach, hiring an expert who's a expert in one area, I think is so important. And I would love to be able to open myself up with a new program that I'm launching soon that's going to be available, which is my brain into 24 videos and group coaching, so that you get content, you get the information, you get the expert, and you get the community. The second piece is that proven roadmap, which, you could have an expert, but they might not have a proven roadmap. They might just be meeting with you week to weeks, whatever needs attention, which is fine. But I'm a big believer in actually giving somebody, let's say, 16 lessons. That's the roadmap to healing. Of course, when I have, let's say, 16 lessons, I'm working with somebody, that doesn't necessarily mean we're only going to meet 16 times. But that proven roadmap is to say, hey, what you're saying right now, let's talk about it, but we're actually going to nail it in 3 weeks when we get to that point, because everything we do from now until then is going to help you prepare for that. And a proven roadmap, I think our humanness needs that. We need to know that, in week 5, we're going to cover this. And in week 8, we're going to cover that. And I think that's why a lot of us are challenged by Jesus, because he just gives us one step ahead and to trust him. But in recovery, I think we need to have an idea of where we're going, a bit more concrete, just simply because addicts are short-term thinkers. They get caught up in like, today's not going perfectly, so I must be a failure. And I want to make sure I help guys understand that you're on a journey, and the journey is for you to figure all this stuff out. And then the third thing is like-minded community. It's so important to find, especially for a young person, to find even just one person of the same gender, a man or a female, that you can trust to talk to tell them about what you're struggling with. And not just to say, hey, I've been watching porn. It's, hey, my dad is working a lot right now and I'm feeling really alone. Hey, my dad hasn't come to a hockey game with me for a long time and I feel like he doesn't even love me. Hey, my mom is smoking all the time and my dad tells me how much he hates it and I don't know what to do with that. Or, hey, my parents got divorced and I think it's my fault. These are things that kids are thinking. These are things that kids are going through. And if they don't have someone to talk to about that stuff, that isn't just one of their quote unquote buddies, that means they're never learning how to process emotions. So then they end up stuffing them away. And when they get activated because of pain, they watch porn because porn numbs the pain. So that would be the kind of the 3-part idea of how someone can find freedom. How to actually do that. Of course, we can get more specific. I'm not sure if we want to do that today, Sophia, or if this is more of a platform for people to reach out to me or some other coaches. But what would you say is best? I just wanted to give that as a platform first.
Let us, how about if we do both? You can let them get an idea of it, therefore, they will see the need to contact you.
Definitely. Yeah. Yes, that's a great idea. So one of the things that I do with my clients right off the bat, and anyone who's struggling with pornography, I would absolutely recommend this, is to pinpoint what are those triggers? What are those things that set you off in the day to day? So I had a guy I was just meeting with yesterday, and he says that any emotions that he expresses leads to him feeling like he needs to masturbate just because it's so much for him to handle sharing emotions. He said that he's been suppressing emotions for completely for over 3 years. And you could imagine, doesn't he's even said it doesn't matter what emotion I share or what emotion I feel, it makes me want to masturbate because I don't know how to handle it. So that's one of the first things we do, is look at what is triggering you in the day to day life and why are you being triggered by it. It's not I'm being triggered by that attractive woman because I'm horny or because she's hot. It's I'm being triggered by seeing that woman because deep down I feel like women have always rejected me and now I'm fantasizing about her liking me or flirting with me. And then we go into this story of remembering all the times that we had been rejected or afraid to talk to women, or we're at a social gathering and you see a couple together that are very unified and loving and you're single, and it makes you feel less than, it makes you feel inferior, it makes you feel flawed. And that is actually deep down what triggers people, is not so much the sexual thing they're seeing, it's more of the emotional response to what's going on in their life. And there's something called inner child healing. It's definitely not my focus or expertise, but I've worked with guys who are experts in it. Basically, what happens is when we get triggered by something. So let's say later today, I get triggered by my wife, um, you know, accusing me of something that I did when I didn't actually do it. That could very easily send me back to a memory when I was 13 of when I didn't do anything wrong, but my sister broke the table and my mom was accusing me that I did it. It's amazing how our brains will go back to these feelings we had. So in that moment, 13-year-old Shawn would feel accused, would feel would feel like it would be unfair. I would probably feel left out. I would probably feel unloved. And then now in the future, now in my 30-year-old body, 30-year-old brain, a situation that happens triggers my brain to go back to how I felt in a memory like that. And that's what inner child work is about. It's basically saying the pains that you experience growing up don't just go away with time. They stay inside of you and get activated day in and day out. So that would be one of the foundational steps to help somebody begin their journey of healing, is to start to become aware of what is triggering physically, emotionally, circumstantially, and what's driving that to be so substantial where, let's say, my wife accusing me, to me that feels like a level 10, like I'm freaking out. But to somebody who's healthy, that would feel like a level 2. It wouldn't really be that big of a deal. So what are we responding to with a level 10 when actually it's a level 2? That's a great way to see what is actually triggering to me. I know guys that get triggered by things that would never trigger me, and it's based off of their story. And then I get triggered by things that wouldn't trigger somebody else, and it's because of my story. And that's why this is a process that is quite unique to the person, is everybody has a unique story of their own pain and neglect and things that they've gone through. And that's why it's so important to look at what is porn doing for you, because there's something about your story that needs attention, and porn is basically helping you avoid that situation, avoid that pain. It's kind of like a massage. Will often get to the surface of someone, will get a massage and it'll relax their muscles and whatnot, and they'll feel good for a couple of weeks. But deep down, if there's a deeper problem with the tissue or the ligaments, then you need to go and get a surgery, or you need to go into a physio and actually do something about it. And that's typically what happens. A lot of people just want to have the massage where it feels good for a couple of weeks, but then they relapse a month in, and then they're frustrated. So this kind of work is really the deeper work of getting below the surface and finding out what is actually driving my addiction, rather than I'm just horny, or she's just really attractive, or that's just the way it is. It's really what is going on below the surface, because when we name that, we can then begin to make choices as to how else we can get that need met. And that's where there's power.
You know, Sean, that is, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. In my mind, I thought pornography was a response to seeing a lady or someone that you're attracted to, the person is attracted
Mhm.
to. I didn't realize that it is a response to an inner need, a deeper need, as you
Yeah.
had said. But the
Yeah.
question I have in my mind, though, because I know pornography have led people to get involved in deviant behaviors such as rape. Um,
Yeah.
how does that progress though? How is it that the individual reaches a point where pornography no longer satisfies, or is it that they need to play out what
Mhm.
they have been seeing on the screen?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I'll just share this really quick. So I heard this quote one time from a famous psychologist named Gabor Mate. He's really big in the mind-body connection and how our mind often drives our behaviors and how our body reacts. And he's a amazing, amazing man. But he said that if sex was only about sex, then wouldn't sex addicts just marry other sex addicts? And it's a fascinating idea, because sex is about intimacy and acceptance and validation and unity. And that's how God made it. And when we make sex only about sex, we realize that it's never satisfying the deeper things that we long for, that God made sex to be unified with spirit, body, and mind. And that's the reality of it. So that's kind of just a tag on to what you were saying there and asking. And then your question regarding how does it escalate? We actually just recorded a podcast answering an email we got in as to, like, how does porn escalate? How is it not considered cheating if it's just porn, etc. And that's the Secret Habit podcast if anyone wants to listen to that. But the biggest thing to understand with the brain and the escalation of, we call it whatever, deviant acts, is that when we watch porn and we get that tremendous rush of dopamine, that's an unnatural amount of dopamine. And after a while, our brain can't handle that much dopamine, so that the sensors actually atrophy. So the dopamine receptors atrophy, which means that they're not as powerful or they don't work as well, which means that you need more and more dopamine to get the same feeling. It's like that with sugar, as an example. When my wife and I don't eat sugar for a long time and we go back to having something sugary, it's like, whoa, like that is like really sugary. I didn't realize just how sugary that was. Our brain, if we take a break from something, go back to it, we actually realize how powerful it is. But when we're just living in it, we don't really realize how sugary something is, or how dopamine charged something is, how sexual something is. So when somebody's immersed in pornography, their dopamine receptors have atrophied and they need more of something to get more dopamine to get the same experience. So what that means is that they're going to need to look at different types of pornography, and dopamine is released typically when something is risky or more grotesque, which unfortunately leads people down the road of homosexual pornography, fetish pornography, animal pornography. And unfortunately, when those begin to not satisfy that need for more dopamine, people then go and try and live out what they've experienced. Some people might start with, you know, regular sexual interactions, but then that might not give you the same dopamine, because then you build a relationship with somebody and it becomes more normal, and that's not going to be as much dopamine. So then they move on to several sexual partners, and they move on to homosexual partners, and they move on to different styles of relationships, minors and older people, older women, older men. And then unfortunately, it just escalates from there. Once you've made a couple of really risky or grotesque decisions, it becomes easier to do it. It becomes easier and easier to do it. So we look at things like rape or things like child pornography as that escalation. And we see most serial killers, I don't know what the stats are, but it's been proven from what I understand that most serial killers actually, one of the first things they ever started on was pornography, and it created like a deep. I probably don't have enough time to get into this today, but there's a hatred towards women that often happens in men who are addicted to porn and move towards sexual abuse, because they have been neglected by women. So they use porn as a way to get back at them, take revenge on them. And when porn creates in us a vengeful spirit or a hostile spirit, which it often does, because it's basically violence against women, that is when things get really scary and men begin to look at the types of pornography that are really abusive towards women as things they want to live out. So that would be an idea of how it escalates. It's really in the neurobiology and the dopamine, and then it overtakes us. I don't think many people have like a moral decision that they're going to go ahead and do that, but we're at bay of our computering system, which is our brain, and it makes it really hard when somebody gets totally trapped.
Wow. Um, I'm learning a lot.
That's
I'm
good.
learning a
Glad.
lot, Sean. The thing is though, how is it? Can they figure out the correlation between their hatred for women and that the actual seed is pornography? Because if they can, well, I'd like to think that a, an individual, a man, would not want to constantly or deliberately hate others, or the need to punish. Um, in my mind, I'm thinking that they would want that kind of freedom. So how can we help them to realize the connection between their hatred and pornography?
Yeah, so I have an assignment that I give clients. It's just called "How Have You Hated Women," and it goes through an exercise for them to remember like times that they've been hurt by women growing up. Could be their mom, could be an ex-girlfriend, could be anybody, could be a Hollywood star that a young boy was attracted to but realized he would never be able to measure up. And it just frames our mind towards women. I've had so many clients where there's this this hierarchy of women. There's these really attractive women at the top that they could never have and or never talk to, and it creates an anger towards them. So it's really looking at our story or our past history and looking at when have I been hurt by women and how has that framed my mindset towards them. So if you've been, yeah, maybe you were cheated on by a woman, maybe you were cheated on by a girlfriend, maybe you were dumped by your girlfriend in the worst time of your life when your grandpa died, and it just framed your mind that you're not good enough and women are the problem, or women are never satisfied, they're so hard, they're whatever. And we often get in these lies. There's all these lies we create about other people. And unfortunately, because of pornography, the whole industry is violence against women. So a young boy seeing porn gets very used to seeing women being taken advantage of and abused and aggression being used against them. So it almost becomes normal for a boy to objectify a woman, to be violent towards them, because if your mentality to a woman is she's a sex object, then that can only be a hostile mentality, and that's where misogyny comes from. That's where a lot of these things start.
Wow. Wow. I'm processing it.
It's a
Okay.
lot.
Yes, it is. But that I'm trying to figure out how can a parent, let's say a parent saw this,
Yeah,
and in the meantime, just before getting to contact you, how can they, as a parent, help their child? They suspect, they're
yeah,
not too sure, but they have seen changes in their child's behavior. How
yeah.
can they engage that conversation or start that conversation so that they can build up to getting the help for that child?
Yeah. So the challenge is that kids don't just go ahead and spill all the beans one day because their parents come and ask them. If parents haven't done a good job the entire life of their child building trust and creating safe places to communicate, you're not going to just randomly get all of this out of your child. So it's actually the parent's responsibility to have 1,000 small conversations about sex, about emotions, about communicating when you feel unsafe. The problem is parents nowadays think it's one conversation, and it's typically really awkward. And then the kid feels ashamed and guilty and weird. And then they just want to hide from their parents. So I say that to say that it's not as easy as just going to your kids and saying, hey, like, let's fix this together. If there hasn't been that kind of language and communication established, it's pretty challenging. One of the best things that I think, and looking at my own story, I wish that my parents did with me, they didn't establish that kind of safety or grounding for communication. But I sure wish my parents would just come and ask me, how are you doing, Shawn? Like, how are you actually doing? What's going on with school these days? How are you? How is your emotions towards school? Or, I know dad's been working a lot lately. How are you feeling about that? Like, actually just talk to your kid, ask them great questions that has nothing to do with pornography, because it's not about pornography. Ask them about their heart, ask them about their mind, ask them who they're angry at, why they're angry. Are they feeling hope? Are they feeling hopeless? Ask them good questions to find out if maybe they're going down a bad road, not because they're bad kids or anything of that matter, but because they're feeling hurt, they're feeling hopeless, they're feeling alone. And your job as a parent is to make them feel loved, to make them feel seen, not to fix them.
So it goes right back to to what's on the inside, to what's
On the
going on
inside.
internally.
Yes. There's a great podcast, and maybe we can put this link somewhere, Sophia.
Sure.
There's a guy named Adam Young. He has an amazing podcast called The Place We Find Ourselves. And episode 2 talks about the 6 needs of every child. And if I try and remember them all right now, I'd probably butcher them and put them out of order. But there's a couple of them where it's just that a kid, a child needs to be able to share big emotions like anger and sadness without a parent shutting it down. A child needs to experience a parent when there is a rupture of trust or the parent does something wrong, the child needs the parent to repair that relationship after a rupture with an apology and asking for forgiveness. Parents are responsible for attuning to their children. And so often, a lot of parents end up just playing the role of, I'm the parent, so I'm right. I'm the parent, so you should do this. When really, trust is earned. It doesn't matter if they're your child or your coworker. If you're not a trustworthy person, your kid's not going to trust you. So I think there's a big call for parents to become parents, and I don't think there's a lot of parents really parenting their kids anymore. I think it's very autopilot. Well, here's this iPad, here's a cell phone, here's the TV. No wonder they're finding porn. You're giving them the things that help them find porn. So I have a huge passion to call parents up to parent their kids, and I'm challenged by that every day because now I'm a parent, and it's she's only 16 months, so I have some time to figure this stuff out. But we already talked to her about her vagina, about her body parts, about daddy's penis. We talk about that already because you have to, because it's godly and beautiful, and we want her to know it's godly and beautiful. So I just really think parents need to really start seeing the beauty of God's creation so that their kids can see that they think it's beautiful and be role models and examples. I want our daughter Violet to see mommy and daddy being intimate and hugging and kissing and laughing and giggling and seeing that that is beautiful, that's what relationships are about. I want Violet to see me just rub mommy's shoulder or whatever. I want her to know that we're intimate, that we care about each other, and that sexuality is really beautiful. So I think parents can be models so beautiful for their kids, the model they can set, the example they can set. But yeah, going back to how can parents do it? I think it's just going to be starting with good questions to make their child really feel safe, because safety is where it all begins.
Yes, it does. But what you said about your daughter seeing yourself and your wife, it gives her the security as well as the knowledge to know that there's no shame in it.
Yes.
It is God made it to be beautiful. God made intimacy between a man and a woman. And it creates that worldview for her because she's
Yes.
growing up into a world that is very diverse, very different. So it gives her that framework. Okay, Sean, our time is just about over. I want to ask you just to give your final thoughts, final words on this whole thing about men and boys becoming trapped by pornography, and
Yeah.
just bless them.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the favorite things I like to share with men, this is for women as well, as much as the topics for men and boys. Um, you're not the problem. I think we all need to hear that. We have an enemy who is the problem. He hates you as a Christian. He hates you because you resemble God's image. He hates sexuality because God made it beautiful. And it's so important for us to realize that we have an enemy who is against us. And one of the ways the enemy has corrupted our sexuality, even just our beings as images of God, the bearers of the image of God, is by creating trauma in our historic story, our history. So what I love to tell people who are struggling with pornography, who don't know what to do about it, is for them to realize that they have been given a faulty foundation based on their story of pain and trauma. And every decision they've made in their life is from a faulty foundation, so that the choices they're making are not good choices. They're not from a place that offers the opportunity for good choices. And I like to put it this way, where if you were wanting to be a mathematician when you grow up and your school teacher tells you that 2 plus 2 equals 8 and 5 times 5 equals 10 and all these math equations that are wrong, your foundation for math is going to be incorrect, and everything you try and do for math is going to be wrong. That's how most people live their life. They've been given a foundation that is just unhelpful, unhealthy, and wrong, and they're trying to make choices based on all that they know. So I say that just to let you know that you're not alone. We've all been given a faulty foundation, that you're not the problem. Doesn't mean that you blame other people, but it means that there's compassion for you in your story. And compassion is so godly. It says that the love of God draws us to repentance, not the wrath. And when we can understand that we've been through some hard stuff, we can offer ourselves some compassion, realize that our story matters. And when we experience God's love, it builds a new foundation for us to begin to make better choices from. So I want to encourage the men just to say that your foundation can be restored. And God is in the business of restoring the foundation. And I just love seeing when men have a new platform to live from and actually feel responsible for making good choices because they now have a place to draw from that's healthy. So you're not alone. This is a normal struggle that so many men deal with, and that there is so much hope for you, because if I can do it, guys that I work with can do it. Anyone can do it. And that's why I feel so called to do this work, because it's in those moments where you feel like you can't, you need a reminder from somebody who's done it to say, you sure can. And you're right on track. Everything you're doing is part of the journey.
Yes. Thank you, Shawn. Can you tell our audience how they can get in touch with you?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we have our organization called Secret Habit. You can find us at secrethabit.ca. You can find us on all major platforms, the Secret Habit podcast, if you want to hear more from myself and Helena talking about different topics around sexuality, pornography, erectile dysfunction, etc. Those will be our two main places. And you can follow us on Instagram at Secret Habit Life Coaching, where we do reels, have some fun with this topic, and educate people together so that there is hope, because sometimes this topic can be bleak. We want to make it fun. Sometimes we do some fun reels. We do our podcast very raw and real, add some laughter into it. And then we have our coaching services and programs for people that really want to dive in and get the help that they need. So secrethabit.ca, the Secret Habit podcast, and Secret Habit Life Coaching on Instagram.
Great. Thank you so very much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure that others who watch these videos will do as well. May I encourage everyone who sees this, if you know that you have a struggle, if you know that you are dealing and wrestling with pornography in the secret, and you can't find anyone to trust, because sometimes it can be difficult to find a trusting friend or someone who, especially within the Christian community, who will not look down on you. Please contact Shawn and his company. Contact them so that they can help you, because freedom is a good place to be. It's good to be free. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching this video, and please like and subscribe. Have a great day. Many blessings to you.